the humble walk with God. But he giveth more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Be afflicted, and mourn, and weep, let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. James 4 verses 6-10. When taking up the subject of pride and humility, one finds great comfort in the way James approaches the subject. But he giveth more grace. It is as if the message here from God's Spirit is, but for the grace of God we would all be consumed in the pride of our fallen flesh. Pride comes naturally and is prolific. Humility is the product of God's grace in human flesh. Christ is the greatest example of humility, as he laid aside his heavenly garments, and clothed himself in human flesh, only to later lay aside his outer garment and gird himself with the servant's towel. John 13 verses 4 and 5. Ultimately, this pictures the laying aside of the outward expression of his divine glory so that he might be made sin for us. He humbled himself unto death, even the death of the cross. Phil. 2:5-11. God not only resists the proud, he hates pride. Pride is sin and God hates sin, but especially the sin of pride. Psalms 101 verse 5, Proverbs 6 verses 16 and 17, 8:13. Here are 5 reasons why this sin in particular is hated so by God. 1. It was the original sin committed by Lucifer which cast him down to earth. 2. It was the sin of Eve which ultimately brought the fall of the human race. 3. It is the root sin of most symptomatic sins committed today. 4. It is the most subtle and common sin found in believers. 5. It is the one sin which most sinners stumble over when faced with God's free gift of salvation by grace alone. James presents a 5-fold progression for the child of God who through God's grace desires humility of spirit. The progression is composed of key action verbs: submit, resist, draw nigh, cleanse, be afflicted. These words give us a course of action to bring our proud hearts to God-pleasing humility. 1. It must begin by submission. Here is the recognition of the lordship of Christ and our role as servants, whose wills are solely to do that of the Master's bidding. Satan will oppose this act of submission in your life to the Lord. He will shoot the fiery darts of self-exaltation into your mind. He will promote esteeming yourself, building up the self-esteem of the flesh. 2. To this we must resist until he flees. 3. By drawing nigh to God, we get the real view of ourselves, exposing our true hearts. We cry out like Isaiah of old, "Woe is me, Isa." 6:1-5. 4. Clean hands and pure hearts are the conditions for entering his presence. Psalms 24 verses 3 and 4. 5. This position in God's presence should cause deep remorse and repentance like Job in dust and ashes, and we should be afflicted over the sin in our lives. Job 42 verses 1-6. As we take our sin and ourselves seriously before God, we will begin to walk with God in humility of heart. Micah 6 verses 6-8. No matter where you are in the pathway of the Christian walk, pride can have a devastating impact on your service, worship, relationships, and your fellowship with God and one another. Like the simple game of Simon Says, we may have gained a small step forward in our walk with God, and experience a major setback when the sin of pride gains a foothold in our life. Pride and humility are opposites in constant contrast and struggle in our lives.